most of us have a way of shutting down on our feelings, shutting down on our vulnerability. That means that we can tell ourselves that we feel safer, that we feel okay with what's happening. But when the pandemic happened, what happened alongside that was that all of those things that we normally do to look after ourselves, going out, seeing our friends, going to the gym, going shopping, all those kind of external things, those external things were taken away. And we were left with nothing but ourselves. And lots of us hadn't asked for that. We didn't know it was coming and we weren't prepared for it. So we were met with facing a level of vulnerability that we, quite frankly, were not prepared for.
May I ask a question, Zoe?
Aska.
It's fascinating. Thank you so much. If potentially, we are in this situation, it's not all going to change overnight. We're hopefully going to be allowed out and seeing people, but we might then again have another lockdown situation. How do we best support each other, knowing that we're all on these like grief roller coasters, whether it's like something super tiny or something bigger that we're struggling with, and whether that's in a work environment or even like whoever you're living with, or close friends or whatever. How do we support each other, knowing what we're going through, but also knowing what they're going through?
I think the most important thing is to be aware and acknowledge that what you're going through might be different to what the next person's going through. But it's highly likely that you will be able to relate to what the other person is going through. So lots of people just find it really validating to be listened to. So you could say things like, tell me about that. And you can say things like, oh, I can relate to that from when that happened to me a couple of months ago, or I can really identify with that. Um, Generally speaking, giving advice is not the best thing to do in personal relationships, because all people really want is to be heard and to be acknowledged and to be witnessed and seen for what they're going through. So I would always encourage people to, rather than try and jump in and fix the situation, because we can't, as we've established through all of that talking that I did, to really just listen to each other and just, yeah, that sounds really hard. What's the hardest part of that for you? And get really curious about what's going on for people in their individual experiences, because there's that saying at the moment, we're all in the same like ocean, but we've all got different boats. We're in the same storm, but we're all in slightly different boats. So don't assume that anyone's experiencing the same thing as you are at any given point, but really ask them and be curious. Like I was encouraging us to be curious about ourselves, you can also be really curious about other people. The other thing that I just drop in there, and I haven't brought it up, although the grief stages would naturally progress onto this if I was to sort of talk further about them, is this idea of hope. Hope is something that we can actively work on and cultivate within ourselves. And it's important that we differentiate hope from expectation. So expectation leads to disappointment, which leads to resentment, whereas hope is something that is actually a sort of a protective mechanism around your emotional resilience. It's basically your like recovery. It's what makes you recover quicker when there are backslides, or when you have a bit of an emotional bump in the road. And there are lots of different types of hope that you can experience. You don't have to be an optimist or a realist. I'm happy for you to be a pessimist, but to be thinking about, okay, where can I find hope? Can I just hope that maybe tomorrow's going to be 1% better than today? That one often works really well for people. What's going to make tomorrow 1% better than today was? And be cultivating hope in that way, or look for the things that actually bring you gratitude, that bring you joy. Personally, I do gratitudes each evening. I think over my day and I think of 3 things or more that I'm grateful for. I don't always feel grateful. I don't always feel hopeful. Sometimes it's really difficult and I'm in a bad mood and I don't want to do it. But it's really important that in terms of understanding about cultivating hope, that I stick to those commitments to myself.
With your practice, are you getting a lot of people, or kind of like what percentage of people have kind of got really like comfortable within the like, there's no expectation for me to go out and see people. I quite like, being able to have that, not an excuse, but the reasons that I'm not doing all these things, and they kind of got comfortable within that and don't want to go back to kind of normal life where they're expected to go into work all the time and like see loads of people and travel and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I think everyone's experiencing that to an extent. I'm in a very privileged position because I speak to lots of people every week. I have my private practice, and then I have the groups that I do. And what amazes me is that everyone thinks everyone else is really excited about going out. And I don't know, maybe that's a social media thing, but most people who I've come into contact with are saying, oh my God, what's it going to be like going to the pub? Like, what's it going to be like going into the office? It's going to be so weird. How am I going to get used to that again? How am I going to get used to having to be somewhere at 9 o'clock in the morning, at 8:30 in the morning? You know, there isn't a person that I've spoken to that is not experiencing a level of anxiety is too strong a word, but maybe dysregulation around that stuff. I keep encouraging people to talk to each other about it, because most people are having that experience, but we project this sort of, you know, yeah, we're going to be free and we're going to go out and we're going to do this and we're going to have parties, and in the background we're all going, I don't know, I'm not sure, I don't really want to do that yet, and that's perfectly okay. But the more honest we can be with each other about our anxieties, about our fears, about what we're ready for and what we're not ready for, the more identification, the more connection, the more socializing we'll be able to do at a level that works for us, rather than completely overwhelming ourselves. So keep talking to each other about it. Keep telling your truth about where you're at with all of this. Because what I can tell you is that I don't think I've come across a person who is genuinely 100% ready to live their life like they did before the pandemic. I haven't come across that person yet. So I think it's something that we've all come up with in our heads, that there are people out there that are going to be absolutely fine. No one's going to be absolutely fine. It's going to be difficult for everyone, just in slightly different ways.